Welcome to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm your host, Pam Rader, and today I have Susan Power with me. She is the founder and CEO of Power Up Leadership, which is a boutique leadership coaching advisory company in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The company vision is to create inspiring workplaces, which I love because workplaces can be toxic. And I think that leadership is the catalyst to creating beautiful workspaces. Over Susan's 20-year career, she's supported many leaders to successfully transition from technical leader to effectively lead and inspire a team towards high performance. So you've got a whole laundry list of amazing qualifications, but let's just suffice it to say that you are an amazing coach. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. I really appreciate the chance to have a conversation with you. I know we're in similar spaces, albeit on opposite coasts of the country. So I think this will be a great conversation.
So tell me a little bit about, you've been in leadership for 20 years, is kind of similar to me. And I've seen a lot of changes in leadership. What strikes you as the biggest change that people maybe need to make in their leadership to be successful today versus, old school?
Yeah, a lot has changed in 20 years. I think the biggest one, at least the one that I've been thinking about a lot lately, is really making yourself emotionally vulnerable as a leader. Like when I started 20 years ago in oil and gas in Calgary, Alberta, it was very old school, top down leadership style, great workplace, but just really different expectation of how you would show up and communicate as a leader. Like you had to have your ducks in a row. I never really saw a leader getting very emotional, but now I think it's a differentiator, especially when you think about AI and everything AI can go, the human connection, which in my mind, the emotional connection becomes really, really important to get.
I love that. I was recently leading a transformational leadership kind of workshop, and there was an HR professional that kind of was balking in the face of, I was teaching some emotional connection. There's no room for emotions in the workplace. And I said, actually, that's the thing that's going to, if we don't have those social emotional skills and the ability to lead with vulnerability, that's what's going to kill the workplaces. And I also see that as a big change. Now, it's tough to be a leader who's supposed to know the answers and find that balance of vulnerability while still having their team feel like they're in charge and that the team is safe and that somebody's at the helm of the ship. Is that like a nuance
Yeah.
that people can learn?
That's a really good way of putting it. And yeah, because you don't want the opposite extreme where the person feels like the leader's completely frazzled in overwhelm mode and sharing every emotional thought that crosses their mind. And they feel like, well, are they able to pull it together to bring the team together to achieve results? But finding that balance of when's the right time to be vulnerable versus like when do you need to kind of just dig deep and maybe not show how you're fully feeling. So kind of reading the room and reading what the team needs is, I think, a part of it.
And that, I think, the ability to read the team comes with having a certain amount of emotional intelligence to be able to recognize, identify, and express your own emotions. How the heck would you know how to read a room if you didn't know how to do that yourself? So, do you think there's a certain amount of personal development that is now just required if you want to be a leader?
I think so. And I know we kind of probably are singing from the same psalm book a little bit here, but like what I think of when I think of the opposition to it is I hate to say it, but I think of some really technical men in particular. I mean, there are women that could fall into this camp too, but the ones that are so financially focused on the numbers, the metrics, the results, that they don't leave any time or space to really maybe check in with themselves and have that brave, courageous approach to share what they're feeling. And sometimes I think they don't see a place for that in the workplace. So maybe they're stuck a little bit in the old school mentality still. That's what I think of when I think of like what could get in the way of it.
Right. I see this as a leadership changing in terms of when we have those technical leaders. And as you said, some women can fall into it, but there's a lot of men. And I hear, and it's in every level of leadership. I hear often from clients of mine that say, well, when I was coming up, they basically threw bricks at my head and I had to figure it out. And, and they sort of have that mentality that that's how it should be. And I think there's an opportunity for transformational leadership that increases retention, it increases employee satisfaction, it increases productivity. And so I know this, I'm subscribing to it. Like you said, we're singing from the same songbook. Talk about why becoming a transformational leader is such an important thing nowadays versus a technical leader.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think of, if I can answer your question kind of in a roundabout way, if that's okay. I think of a leader that I worked with 20 so years ago, and she was in charge of a major change transformation project. It was in oil and gas, and she was very overwhelmed for whatever reason. And I remember in the meeting, she actually broke down in tears, and everyone in the room was kind of like, WTF, like she's in charge. Like you could see that it wasn't a good reaction, even though they were, trying to comfort her and whatnot. And I'd be curious if in that same workplace, fast forward 25 years, if that same reaction would still be had, because if the leader is leading at least the change management part of a transformation project, and that's how they're feeling, imagine those on the receiving end of all the change, across the organization. So I think it's important for that reason. If I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Well, yes. Let's make the distinction. So there's what, 5 kinds of leadership. There's autocratic leadership, just like do what I say. And then there's democratic leadership, which is, well, everybody gets a say, but I don't know that I want the creative department weighing in on the accounting, And then there's sort of hands-off leadership, which is like, oh, my team's great, they don't need me, which can lead to some breakdowns in communication. But then we get to transformational leadership, which requires coaching skills. And this is seeing people as they're not the problem. If there's a problem, is that a mindset problem, a skill set problem? What do I need to coach in this individual to help them reach their potential and their greatness? And is that a lot of the work that you do when you go into organizations, is teach leaders how to coach their people?
Yeah, precisely. Just like you said, the transformational leadership. I had a leader I worked with for a few years, and he would always say, our job as leaders is to change the people or change the people. So I think it kind of speaks to helping them shift their mindset and bring them along. Otherwise, they got to go. And I mean, it's kind of a crass way to put it, but it makes the point versus transactional leadership where you're just giving them the task or the assignment and not really supporting them with the leadership skills through coaching so they can be successful.
Yeah, I think that for what I see out there is a lot of leaders just think when I tell someone what to do, they should know how to do it and they should do it well. And then everybody that, you hear, oh, no one works hard and everybody's underskilled and all of this. And I say, no, that's your job as a leader. Like your job is to identify those places where people are struggling and then have the time and the space and the energy to coach them through that. But if you as a leader are bogged down in micromanaging and controlling everything, you don't have time to coach your people.
Yep. 100%. No, I totally agree with what you're saying. And to build on that, like I think of the energy. This came up in a leadership development program was rolling out for a client in person last week. We're talking about leadership presence and the energy or the way that the leader shows up, like even before any word comes out of their mouth, just the vibes that they're giving off, that's contagious and can impact the team. So if the leader's having a really hard day, if they don't share that and say, team, I'm struggling today, be patient with me, I had a hard time on the personal front or whatever it is, the team's still going to know, even if they don't share that. And they could make the wrong connections and think that it was something that they did or said or didn't do. I think, it's a complicated topic and the leader just really needs to be tuned in to themselves, like you said, to be able to know their own emotions, not be too controlling, and really find the right words to share with the team.
Now we're talking about this in terms of, in a business, in a company. What are the benefits to a company, like long term, of having a transformational leadership team over a technical leadership team?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think the benefits, there's so many of them. We know And you would know this from your work, of course, too, Pam, but we know leadership effectiveness goes up. There's a positive correlation with business profitability. And I think that's for a lot of reasons. It attracts the best and brightest. You have better results achieved, less miscommunication. You're creating that environment, that positive culture, employee engagement, the type of workplace that the best talent wants to work with. And really, you're upskilling your leaders. So as you continue to coach them, you are just building a stronger pipeline of leadership throughout the entire organization. And it just really comes down to that care, that genuine care, and that development piece.
Yeah, I think that as you're speaking there, all the benefits are there certainly, but the biggest one for me, as I see it, is there's a lot of leaders that are burnt out, they're overwhelmed, they're struggling. And I think it's a direct result of a disconnect with their people and a lack of ability to communicate effectively. And when we can communicate and express our emotions, our concerns, in ways that are positive and powerful and helpful to the organization, a lot can come off the leader's plate and they can then focus on what do I need to do to move the needle to grow my business? They're not just managing people and putting out fires all the time. And so these skills actually directly also correlate to the growth of the business long term. So if you want to be great at business, you got to be great with people. I think Simon Sinek says that if you don't, yeah, you got to be good with people or you're not good at business.
That makes perfect sense. And how do you help leaders who are really cemented in their habits? Like, I'm thinking of, 40 to 50-year-old person that has led a team in a certain way for years. How do you interrupt that in a way that helps them change as quickly as possible? Like, is there an approach you would normally use?
This is where I actually combine my experience as a yoga teacher and a spiritual teacher. I teach nervous system regulation. When they understand that the way they've done it, their nervous system perceives as safe and the way that it has to be, and that their nervous system will set off alarm bells when they do something differently, they can witness that and still take new action because they have the knowledge that it's going to feel that way when they change. So I sort of add in that element of nervous system training and regulation so that they understand that they're going to confront discomfort when they do something new, and it's going to feel like they just put on a really itchy sweater and they're going to want to go back to their old ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love that you combine different modalities through your yoga training. Like, I'm working with a new coach myself right now, and he's based out of Toronto, and he's helping me learn how to be more emotionally expressive as a leader, which I found interesting. It came out of his assessment. And the activity he gave me was every morning for 10 minutes, stare at the wall, don't do anything, don't think, don't meditate, don't drink your coffee, don't look at your phone. And it's just to sit with yourself. And then at the end of the day, before going to bed, to close my eyes and just surrender and kind of let the waves of the day, the emotions come up. If that makes me cry, if that makes me yell, like, just be with that. And at first I was like, are you for real? Like, this is you want me to stare at the wall for 10 minutes? I got stuff to do. Let's go. But this has been 1 week later, really impactful. Like, it's really helping me make new connections and letting go of control a little bit with my own business.
Yeah, I think that so much in spirituality, we say what you resist persists and what we embrace dissolves. And so much of our doing as leaders comes from fear, and we're resisting feeling that fear or feeling inadequate or feeling like we don't have control. And so we're busying ourselves doing mundane tasks to try to keep things rolling. And we don't stop to feel. And when we stop to feel, that fear can dissolve, and I believe we can see more clearly, because the science of it is if you're in fear, your amygdala is it's like a smoke detector that's gone rogue, and you don't actually have access to your higher faculties. So that just simple act of staring at the wall, it's a surrender and an allowing and embracing. And when we make space for whatever I'm feeling is okay, then I think we can be a safe space for whatever anybody else is feeling. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, it all points back to starting with yourself as the leader. That's 100% for sure. And I think what you talk about, the smoke, how did you phrase it?
It's
Kind of like
the smoke detector.
smoke detector going off. Like, I think of, like, we all have different versions of what that is for us, but I know for me, I'll start to think I can outwork or outthink any problem or outlearn any problem. So if I get anxious about whatever in the business, I'm like, okay, bunker down, Susan, time to work. But that's a strategy to relieve anxiety. And it's not, you know what I mean? Like what got you here
Totally.
won't get you there. You need to find a new way to operate sometimes.
I have had that so often where I'm like, I got to work hard and I've got to, my marriage just suddenly came apart in February after 19 years, and I had no idea that it was happening. And my
Or
first instinct was to dive into work because it was something I could do and control. And I have made a concerted effort that for the next 6 months, I'm actually not pushing my business and I'm doing the bare minimum to go because I'm just surrendering. And you know what's
yeah.
happened is new opportunities have trickled in and the universe keeps taking care of it. I get just the right amount of clients, the right amount, and it's really interesting to me that in the surrender, things come with more ease. And
Yeah, you
I
don't have to
think as
work
a
so hard.
leader, we have to know when to let go, when to surrender because that, like you said, it's a coping strategy. It's an anxiety relieving strategy when we're just trying to control things, but it's not effective.
No, well, not at certain stages, and very wise of you to have that insight. Because I that was exactly my strategy 7 years ago when I got separated and just started my. I was just I might have been at a different phase than you. So I was just starting my business,
Mhm.
and left corporate, and I'm focused 100% for the past 7 years. I mean, my kids, of course, I focused on them too, but I really like evenings, like really, really focused on the business. And now I'm just realizing kind of what you're saying, the surrender piece needs to take priority. But it's so tempting sometimes when something changes just to latch on to what we think we can control, when in fact, like what can, like there's so many things out of our control.
Right. I think the more I practice surrender in my life, the better leader I am. And the reason I think that is because most people have that same, oh, look at that, talk with my hands, and then I made my camera go funny. The reason I say that is because most people, when we try to control, we are so hyper focused on the thing we're trying to control that we actually have blinders on, and we miss the beautiful invitations to go in a different direction or the beautiful invitations to expand our capacity. And I think for me, one of the biggest principles of leadership, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, is as a leader, I have to go first in many things. And first and foremost, in expanding my capacity to hold discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree with you because if you go first, it invites your team to do the same or your client to do the same. But that's probably what makes it so scary, right? Because you're the one going first and kind of dipping your toe into the deep end. But there's that I just think of like the whole faith piece, right? Like the opposite of fear is faith. And it's hard sometimes to lean into that. But if you do, it's like you say, you notice things that you might not notice with the blinders on if you're just fixated on trying to control it.
100%. And I think that this all translates as we're kind of blending this sort of spirituality and the science of the amygdala and all of that. Leader isn't a position. It's not something you do. I believe that it's someone that you are. It's who you become everywhere in your life if you're really serious about it. If you want to have respect in the boardroom and you want to have a team follow you, you have to live your life as a leader, meaning you live by example. You show people what it is to lead rather than tell them. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, you just gave me flashback from a triangulation call I was on the other week with the coaching client and their manager, which is really a chance to align with, hey, here's the leadership journey of this person who reports into you. Are we on track? And the person was struggling with work life integration, working a lot of overtime. And the leader was encouraging them, you need to take that time off. It's important you take that time off and spend time with your family and take care of your hobbies, your health. And then when I asked them, well, what tips do you have for this person to do that? Their response was basically, I struggle with this too. And I'm working a lot of overtime. And you know what I mean? Where it just becomes lip service. And it's kind of like, I get it. There's a lot on everyone's plate, but you have to role model what you're asking for.
100%. People watch your feet, not your lips.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's actually one of the reasons why I decided to sort of step back a little bit and to tend to myself and let this be uh, an opportunity for spiritual evolution, for growth, for self discovery, so that I can come back to sort of pushing a little bit more full force with new eyes. I preach this to my clients. But if I don't do it, then I'm just, that's the height of hypocrisy. So I think even as leadership trainers, we have to look at like, how are we living our lives? Because people are watching us. And that's why this podcast is called Authenticity Unleashed. I think the greatest hallmark of leadership is authenticity. Say, if you're scared, say you're scared. If you don't know, say you don't know. If you feel like you're in over your head, say it and ask for help. Those are authentic qualities
Yeah.
of a leader.
And everyone loves to be on the receiving end of that. Like, I know I love it when a leader says, I don't know, or I feel scared, because it's so refreshing. You don't hear it all the time. And the trust just goes through the roof when someone says that. You're like, well, wow, like they shared that and they're in charge. I believe them, and I feel the same way. Now I feel comfortable letting them know that I'm scared, whereas before I was scared to tell them I was scared. And then it just becomes more authentic experience for everyone.
I love that you said that because it is so true. I don't know how often, I don't know that people realize how many assumptions we're making in the silence. When a leader is silent, everyone in the room is making it mean something different about themselves. Like maybe they're mad at me. Maybe the company's going under. Maybe I'm getting fired. And if the leader just said, I'm scared and I don't know, and we're going to figure this out together. Now everybody's on board on the same team and we get productivity. But as soon as people are scared for themselves, I know like on my team, if that's ever happened, everyone goes into self-protection, and that's
Yeah,
not good for anybody.
definitely. Yeah, and when the leader, like you say, when the leader says that they're scared, I think, and the team's not used to hearing them say that every day of the week, I think the human reaction is, well, I want to support this leader and find out more about what they're scared, because maybe what they're scared of is different than what's making me uncomfortable. So it almost just pulls people to give more.
Tell me about women in leadership now. How's it changing out there? There was a time, Susan, when you were either a bitch or a pushover, right? Like as a woman leader, like it was like there didn't seem to be this in between. This perception of women in leadership was you had to be hard, ball buster, or you were like overly emotional and just like mothering everyone. I see it as very different now. Do you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's more balanced. Like I think of some women in corporate that I worked with as an employee that almost seemed like men. The way
Mhm.
they communicated, there was a disconnect of like their mannerisms, their body language, how they communicated. Their voices were even like deep. It seemed like I felt like they took on the characteristics of
They're
communicating with
fully in
men.
their masculine energy and denying their feminine energy.
That's exactly it, and I don't think that's effective. I think it does them a disservice, and it does their senior leadership team a disservice, and what you're talking about, I think, is just the more balance between a woman going between both polar masculine and feminine energy in terms of maybe the situation and how they communicate is what comes to mind.
I like to think about the masculine energy more as the container or the riverbanks, and the feminine energy as the river. And it can kind of flow and meander, and it's that creativity and it's like emotional expression. But then as a leader, we still have to have some guardrails up. We can't just let things all bubble over. So it's like finding that sweet balance of we're still in a safe container here. I'm still at the helm. And though there's room for expression.
Yeah. And in both directions, I think a lot of men leaders, and I think in the technical, kind of more analytical spaces, I'm always encouraging them to tap into their feminine energy too. And sometimes they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm trying to break it down for them. But I think it goes in both directions for both genders.
100%. We all have masculine and feminine energy. And if any one is sort of out of balance, we may have some deficits in our leadership. There are times to be in our masculine energy. If the ship is sinking, someone wants to know that somebody's in charge.
Yeah.
But if there's a problem that seems unsolvable, that's an opportunity for some creativity and some expression that is more around the feminine. And so being able to, again, it comes back to understanding self, constantly inquiring about ourselves. And this is what I would like to really just explore and ask you if you have any tips about for people listening who want to step into leadership, step up in their leadership is like, how do people go about this journey of self discovery that will help them in leadership? What should they do?
Well, definitely working with a coach is something that I've found effective for myself. And I know I'm a bit biased because I'm in the coaching space, but I think
I've been with coaches for like 20 years. Same. Like you got to have people to call you on your shit.
definitely. And I think they notice things about our communication style and ask us questions that we might never ask ourselves because we get stuck in our patterns of thinking. So it's really effective for that reason. I also think of the self-discovery piece that you can do independently. And I know at Power Up Leadership, that's the name of my company, we have a bunch of free downloads right on our main homepage, everything from a values identification exercise to a confidence builder to the power of saying no. So there's lots of great, powerful free resources out there that folks can go on our website and download. And, YouTube has great videos. So I think it's that commitment to want to get better as a leader and to really kind of dial in and take that reflection time and ask others too, where do I need to improve? What's my blind spot?
Can everyone be a leader, Susan?
Pam, that's a really hard question. What do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. I actually think that there are people who are more suited to leadership than others. And that a lot of that has to do with the wiring of our nervous systems, and people that become people pleasers tend to not be the greatest leaders because they don't know how to create boundaries and all of that. But you can unlearn some of that stuff. So is there potential for everyone to be a leader? Sure. But I do think some people are more well suited to it, and other people are quite happy to follow an integral leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think of what's your definition of a leader too, right? Because I think a lot of people think of people leadership and I have a team that reports into me. But when I think of a leader, I think the receptionist, the very frontline person could definitely be a leader in the organization and have influence and followership as
I love
well.
that. Influence. That's the thing. That's the magic piece right there. A leader has influence, and it doesn't matter what level in an organization or even in a family. What does it take to gain influence?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you're trying to influence and for what purpose. So, I mean, lots of great material and influence, lots of different strategies, reciprocity, being likable, kind of other people vouching for you, consensus in terms of this person has valuable input. But I think the what comes to mind is the best way to influence is kind of what you were saying earlier of showing up and doing the work as the leader so people can see, like, watch my feet, not my lips, and see kind of
Yeah.
your own transformation. To me,
Yeah.
like, everyone should have multiple transformations throughout their entire life. And if you think of it from a workplace leadership journey, like if you watch videos, I think of Dan Martell. We both know who he is. I know he's in your province. But if you watch videos of him earlier days, how he communicates compared to today, you can see his own transformation, right? And I think every leader should have their own version of
I love that. So it's like a continual, so two things I hear there. Number one, the most important aspect of of having influence is trust.
it.
And I
Hmm.
mean, I guess in the world of social media, they say, people have to know, like, and trust you. So if
Yeah.
people know, like, and trust you, you can be more effective in your influence, and then you have an opportunity to lead. So as human beings, if we are interested in having influence, then where we have to do the work is on ourselves, like to allow people to know who we are. So that's being authentic. If we need people to like us, we have to be approachable. We have to be real. And then to trust us, we have to be living, like walking the talk. And so I think that all of those things translate really well into just leadership, not just in an organization, but in life. You can be a leader in your family. You can be a leader in your neighborhood, in your community, just how you show up. I had another question around that. Hang on. I'll have to edit this part out. It just popped into my head.
I'm sure we'll come back to you when you talk about leadership in different parts of our lives. Like, I think that's a really good point that there's ways to practice this and it all should really tie together to the person, their values, and making a contribution. Like, I was in this leadership delivery the other day and one person said, I find this really hard because I don't see any areas I need to improve. And I was like, looking around the room, and there was kind of some smiles, and at first I thought they were joking, but then I realized they were serious, and I thought to myself, like, well, that's the journey for them. Like, they obviously have some type of blinder on, because how can you be 34 approximately years old and not have any area to improve? Like, that tells you a lot about that person, right?
Wow. Well, I know what I was going to ask about. One of the things that I see in leadership as a mistake, because I want to leave our listeners with like a few little morsels that they can actually like, oh, hey, yeah, I could work on that.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I see, one of the greatest sort of leadership obstacles or blind spots, if you will, is what I call the halo of competence. As a leader, you see someone and they're doing really well at their job, and without giving them any extra training or checking their skill set at all, you continue to promote that person.
Mhm.
And then they are failing or flailing, and you end up having to get rid of that person. To me, that's on the leader. That's the halo of competence. You think because they're good at one thing that they're going to be good at another thing. And I think as leaders, we have to learn the tool of assessment, and then again, like coaching. How do we coach this person up into the next level? We can't just throw them to the wolves. And I see this all the time. I'm sure you do too, where the leaders promote people and then they complain about them.
Yeah, it happens so frequently, especially in these big organizations, right? You promote them to the level till they're no longer effective, and not giving them the support to help them succeed at their next level is a huge loss to an organization, because we know the cost of replacement at the executive level. But really, like, how are they supposed to know it if it's the first time they've dealt with a new, like, whether it's leading a large team, a complex business function, or a business that's failing, they need to turn it around. Like, they need some support to figure it out rather than just through trial and experience.
So, what are some specific? I mean, I've got a couple processes, but what are some specific processes that you would advise a leader to do? Say they wanted to promote someone who is great at their job and they're moving into a job that's a little out of their current scope. What would you suggest that is a process for the leader to make sure that person is successful?
Well, definitely, I think the coaching, so they have a thought partner to bring some of the challenges to, is definitely one component of it. I also like a tool called Success Finder Assessment, because it's a database of 500 benchmark jobs at a competency level that predicts the probability of success if the person's competency level kind of matches what the driver competencies are by each job. Because certain jobs, like even a CEO of leading a $50 million a year business, the competencies can be different than if you're leading a $200 million a year business. So it adds some science in terms of, is this the right person for this role that could be coached through it? Or are we indeed overstretching them where this is unrealistic expectation?
Right. So there are assessment tools for that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, success
and
fund.
I'm just looking at, say, like a smaller business where it's, like this is mom and pop kind of shop more so than a corporation. And I just say make a list of all of the things that would make it like a 10 out of 10 if they were going to knock this next position out of the park. And what skills would they need to have to do it? And then what skills do you see are lacking now and how will you get them those skills? Make a plan for that. I mean, just kind of
Yeah.
simple reverse
Yeah, it doesn't have
engineer.
to be over engineered, right? If it's a smaller organization, a development plan, like
Yeah.
that's a talk through. Well, how are you going to overcome this versus just kind of burying it under the rug?
Yeah, crazy. Okay, so tell me about what would you say are the biggest leadership mistakes and then the biggest leadership tips that you would give to someone in a leadership position to overcome those?
I think like trying to figure it all out your own is one, especially if they're a newly promoted manager, director, that sometimes they feel like, oh, okay, now I'm in this big leadership role, executive role. I'm supposed to have all the answers and figure this out. I can't ask for help. Like, this is my job to figure it out. So that's a common one. And then another one would be really the stress management piece that I think sometimes, like, I think of yoga as a good example. Sometimes a leader feels that they're not stressed out. Like, I feel this way sometimes if I go to yoga class, I'm like, I don't feel stressed out. But then at the end of the yoga class, I'll go, good thing I went to yoga class. I was really stressed out. Didn't even realize it until I
I
feel
call
the
it
difference.
the homicide prevention program.
Yeah. So I think similarly, like leadership wise, that self awareness piece of helping people tune into, the tension in their body and their emotions and elevate their self awareness can help them realize how they're truly feeling versus numbing themselves out to that. So those are two mistakes, not paying attention to those two, and ways to remedy it, making sure you carve out some time for reflection and asking the team for feedback. I think sometimes the tendency is jamming our calendars so full that we don't take any time to think and to reflect. And we think, oh, I could do that on my drive home, or I can do that in line at the grocery store. But thinking time is important. Like it's invaluable and something that a coach kind of supports through the coaching process. But even outside of the coaching calls, having some time to think, strategize, check in with yourself.
Yeah, I think, I often think as myself leading a team, I ask myself, like, what went well about that? And how can I do more of that? But then what could I have done better? Where did I fall short? And I continually ask myself those questions. For me, if I was going to give any leader a, a tool, I would say get good at feedback. Like, get good at creating a culture of feedback where people feel comfortable to give feedback to each other, and they're actually they look forward to receiving feedback. Because I think that that's one of the, we have this old model of the sandwich where it's like one compliment, one bit, like that's so stupid. It doesn't work. People, if you sugarcoat something that tastes terrible, it still tastes terrible when they bite into it. I think that people are more interested in truth delivered with the intention of helping you.
Totally. One of my coaching clients called that the shit sandwich. And I thought it was just a very like accurate way of describing
Exactly
it.
what it is. Yeah. Yeah. I always say if you sugarcoat shit, it still tastes like shit when someone bites into it and now they don't trust you.
Probably even worse than if it was just pure shit sandwich. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So for me, I think like learning a culture of feedback, learning the ways to give feedback and how to frame feedback and how to create a container for feedback is such a powerful tool. And I think that works in families too. As a leader in a family, if you're giving feedback to each other about how something occurs for you, you're learning to communicate and create a better ecosystem in the family. So I think that we're all very in our society so afraid of criticism that none of us
Yeah.
take feedback very well, tip unless we're trained in it.
I think so. And what you were saying about the leader goes first, like asking for feedback first as the leader, hopefully starts to cultivate that feedback rich culture where it's valued. And then you have to do something with the feedback, of course. You can't just take it and then kind of sit on it indefinitely.
Yeah, wow. So what does it look like for people to find you, to work with you?
Powerupleadership.ca is our website, and folks can go on there if they want to book a complimentary test drive with one of our coaches. We do free chemistry calls, or if they just want to kind of explore if we'd be a mutual fit to work together. And I'm on Instagram, Coach Susan Power is my personal Instagram page, and Power Up Leadership on the company side.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for your time today, Susan. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I'm sure that our listeners will take away some great tidbits from this conversation on what it is to be a leader, what the areas they could look at in their own lives, and maybe some blind spots that could be
Yeah,
revealed.
I appreciate the chance to talk with you, Pam. Thanks for having me on your podcast. And it was a real pleasure getting to learn more about how you look at leadership. And yeah, would love to stay in touch.
This is probably the big tip in all of this. There's no competition, right, Susan? It's like let's collaborate, let's share our wisdom, and let's help educate people, because the more of us that are out there doing the good work of transformation, the better the world gets.
100%.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you.